I lost my parents when I was 13, the give back for me was really important because I did get help, and I'm very grateful to our community, our leaders, our counsellors,
How do you find time for yourself?
Carving out of time for me is that I'm very spiritual. My faith and spirituality dictates an awful lot of my own mindfulness. I absolutely loved the countryside.
As a community, as individuals, as maybe a humanity,
There are many Gen Xers like me who will have suffered in silence. They will have seen and experienced, and as survivors, the level of deaths through alcoholism.
You do amazing work, and you've been nominated for so many other awards as well.
Well, firstly, I just want to acknowledge that, we don't acknowledge the Almighty in our space, and I always try and do that because I do genuinely believe that it is with Waheguru's Kirpa.
Guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm Harinder Mullay, and this is the Live the Dream podcast. Today, we have an absolute amazing guest. She is not only the Senior HR Specialist Advisor for the Capital City Group College, she is also the ambassador for 3 amazing charities, such as the Khalsa Fostering Network, the Sikh Women's Aid, and also City Sikhs Network. She has won a ton of awards that she so rightly deserves, and one of them being an MBE. Without further ado, the beautiful and bright Bimmy Rai MBE. Bimmy, welcome to my podcast today. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Harinder. It's an incredible opportunity, a privilege and an honour. So thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. To be honest, the privilege and the honour is all mine, because from what I've seen and read online, and from what I've heard from Tandy, shout out to Tandy Verdi, he shared that he was like, you have to get Bimmy on, and I was like, okay, let me look into this. And when I did, I was like, this is phenomenal. We've got amazing people like you in our community doing amazing work for social inclusion, equity, diversity and inclusion. You've got an MBE, you're in our local community, we're speaking to the MPs and the mayor and the leader of the council, chief execs, to do great things, and you always push them to do better. And I feel people like yourself aren't celebrated enough. So although you have an MBE, I want to celebrate it from myself, from the community, from people who are watching today and joining us, the amazing stuff you've done. So thank you, actually, Bimmy.
This is a really heartfelt thank you, because the idea of curating a space the way that you've done, Harinder, and my deepest appreciation to Tandy. He's an incredible visionary leader himself, and the fact that you've curated this space, and you can, I suppose, like for us, when we're looking at ways of getting the messages out there and trying to engage with different audiences, what you're doing is phenomenal. So, a big thanks and a shout out to you. And I really value this space that you've created for being able to sort of start a conversation, and also just in terms of what we can all, because I think we can all learn from each other. And I think there's something about being able to share our experience together, break bread together is, I think that's really important. And, you're doing such a wonderful job here of making that happen. So salutes to you. And, I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Bimmy. And like you said, Tandy, again, a great leader. And we've got more things coming from Tandy soon. And it's just so nice to see, because when I started this journey and I sort of connected with people who are around me already, who are doing well or doing things and projects. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. People were starting to kind of naturally navigate towards me, or the universe was opening doors or introducing me to people who are doing amazing things. And I was like, in my own sort of hometown or area, we've got fabulous people. And like, it's just a shame that we've not been able to connect in the way before. But I feel like now's the right time, and now's the space we can create to do more, like together, collectively, I feel.
I agree with you completely. I believe the universe is a sentient being, and I think, You know, you hear these old adages from time about right time, right place. I believe that the universe's time is perfection. It doesn't always happen when we want it. And that certainly, I think, for me, is an absolute lesson of life. You know, especially for someone like me who's sort of quite cerebral and had my 5-year strategic plan, and life's, right? So we ended up sort of having to understand the principle of the universe is sometimes you don't always get the things that you need and want straight away. But there is a perfection in the timing in terms of who you meet and the projects that you can initiate. I have so many examples throughout my career where, you know, there's sort of been that frustration of like, you know, why is it not happening? You know, and you sort of put all that effort in and you're sort of clear that you've got all your ducks in a row and it should happen. And when it doesn't, there is a wisdom in that. And I have a pastor friend who, when you meet certain people along the way, you know, they say that sometimes they can be there for a moment or a season. And this particular person, you know, she was with me for a season back in the Midlands. And one thing I always remember, she goes, Bim, delay is not denial. And, you know, that for me says a lot in that, you know, if the time is not right now, that doesn't mean to say that it won't be yours or that you can't make things happen. But, you know, the conditions have to be right. And we have to understand that sometimes things do happen for a reason. So obviously we're here now and this is an amazing space. And, you know, it's important when the opportunities come that we grab those opportunities with both hands, you know, and being full of gratitude when those opportunities come. I think gratefulness is really important.
Amazing. I think that's great advice because having that attitude of gratitude actually does really get you places, doesn't it? And learning from like when things happen at divine timing and not on your time sort of teaches you patience as well. Like I found that quite recently myself in some of the things I've been going through. And because I think we met back in December or November, I think when I first met you. And now it's been 3 months on. And in that time, I'm sorry to have heard you wasn't well for some time. And you mentioned the other day on the phone that you've kind of at a bit of a crossroad with your life. How was that for you?
We all plan for the future. And it's really important whilst you're planning that you take stock of each day and live in the present and live in the now. And that's really important. That was a big lesson for me because I was too busy kind of trying to move forward and trying to navigate, you know, my way in through the future. But you forget also that you still need to get through your day. And, you know, health is such an integral part of our being. And I had a health scare in December, out of the blue, wasn't expected, and it shook me up. So I had a hospital stay. I have to say, like, you know, for someone who hasn't gone through that particular issue before, you know, it was a scary place. And I think as you get older, you know, this idea of your own mortality is a big, you know, sort of weight that you carry around with you in terms of like your lifespan. What do you think you can do to kind of keep healthy and to keep in the race, as it were, when you are faced with a health scare that hospitalises you and then takes you out of the workplace? And I think it's moments like that you go back to basics, and it's you are in survival mode, and you are thinking about, you know, every second counts, and so I'm on the other side of that journey now. And, you know, it's sort of the thing is also how it tests the system, because it's only until you've been through something like that that you understand. For example, I was so grateful for our emergency services, you know, and the SIVA and the care and consideration of the nurses and doctors who intervened. You know, we have people who are saving lives day in, day out. And they also see, cases that they can't help. And, I just have like the utmost respect for all of those, I call them angels, because I think that, to be in that space doing what you're doing in a place of crisis, I went in a space of crisis and I was given all that due care and attention. And that made the difference as to whether I was going to see my birthday and whether I was going to get through the new year, because it wasn't on my radar. None of this was planned. It wasn't like I was aware that there was a health issue. It just happened. And so, it's at times like that as well that, again, it's really important to show gratitude. The infrastructure that we have in this country, we have an incredible health service, and they made a huge difference to me. So alongside that, you talk about employers making reasonable adjustments and making sure that they are also supporting you on your journey back into the workplace. And I'm very lucky that, I have, again, a working environment where my colleagues were, taking care of my coming back in. So I think all in all, it's really important that, I know we tend to moan quite a lot, and it can be quite habitual. When you turn on the TV or you hear the radio, it's like doom and gloom. But actually, when it comes to those crucial moments, those higher values, higher principles of being grateful really need to be shown. So, I'm very grateful for coming out of it. It's like my third month. It's great to have the opportunity to slap on a little bit of zhuzh and put my colour therapy on and be here with you today.
This is the Bimmy Rai brand, isn't it? I love it. I think when I first met you as well, you're very colourful and vibrant, and you had the accolades and the personality to back that as well. And I think that was fantastic. And that's why it was a bit of a shock to see your Instagram post when you was in hospital. And I was genuinely very sad by that, because I was like, oh no, I hope you're okay. And I'm glad that firstly, you've made it through healthily. You're back on your feet. You're back to work, and you're doing really well. And secondly, the gratitude that you've just shown the sort of National Health Service and the staff, especially the nurses, I feel, who don't get enough recognition, probably don't get enough pay for what they do. And like you said, Seva as well, they're saving people's life. They're doing things that are like beyond their pay scale, I feel, saving lives and dealing with abuse and dealing with horrible people at times in very difficult circumstances. That gratitude is also infectious, and I'm feeling gratitude there as well. So it's great to have that attitude to share. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that's great that you feel that gratitude now.
I genuinely do. And that's it takes a lot to be able to kind of, you're exposing yourself out on your socials. And when I put that up, I was still in my hospital bed without my glam and my zhuzh, which I normally do like. But I think, it's unfiltered. And the message that I had was an authentic message about, I went through a point of crisis, and this NHS that we have is such a precious resource for us. And in my time of need, we pay into the system with our taxes and so on. But, in my time of need, they made such a difference to me. And you're right about the nurses. They go over and above. And I'm also very grateful for the specialists like the consultants and the doctors who were there on hand as well. My intervention was given to me in the corridor. As soon as I came into emergency services, they parted the waves, they let me in, and I was given an intervention straight away, which I think, obviously it was serious enough that they had to do that. And I recognise that their expertise in knowing at that point in time what needed to be done, and they're already operating in a crisis scenario because there's so many crisis, possibilities walking through the door every minute, every second of every hour. And for them to know at that point, what did this person need in order to get them out of that crisis mode? And that's a level of expertise, that I thank the doctors and the nurses for. And we have to absolutely be grateful. It is such a precious system. And, sometimes people say, it's only until you have to interact with it that you really realise the value of it. Yeah.
Definitely. And so a big shout out to the NHS, the nurses, the doctors, consultants, specialists that do amazing work. Yeah. And how did you feel when you went through the process of the health scare because you're a very well-to-do person, you're a very well-to-do individual, which we'll talk about some of your accolades in a moment, of the awards you've won, the MBE, you've been invited to the UN, you're like a senior leader, the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Network. Like it's amazing. So going through like such high achievements to then having to be at standstill, stripped back from, like you said, like sort of your zhuzh, and then to be very raw. How was that?
Probably one of the hardest things for someone who, I'm not saying that I'm conditioned, because some of it is self-inflicted in terms of the pace. And that's because I do like to operate at a sort of breakneck speed. It's almost like I haven't got enough hours in the day. But I thrive on that energy, and I thrive in, meeting amazing people like yourself. For me, networking, connections, where the magic happens, I absolutely thrive from those social interactions. Whilst I might be introvert, I think I also do enjoy, conversing. And so if you're a cerebral, which is what I am, I'm very cerebral, and I need that sort of constant stimulation. It doesn't bode well when suddenly life stops. And not only does it sort of halt, but you're having to really kind of go with a blank canvas again and start to build up your resilience. That was really hard for me. And I think mentally, I've always had issues of mental health. And I think that's probably also to do with kind of hormones and, some of the kind of the pressures of life. And I think when you are then sort of isolated, a bit like what we all experienced through COVID, when you're sort of socially isolated, it's very hard to then try and figure, what is my new normal? Because my new normal was something that rest is important, and I value that and I appreciate that. But I felt as though it was a bit of a setback for the pace that I was working at and the projects that I was involved in and the plans that I'd got. But, I'm very grateful for the fact that I'm here and I'm building up that resilience. But I think it's a mindset change, and I had to do some introspection work about what's important in terms of priorities. And when you go back to bare basics, because that's what you have to go through, because you only have enough energy to dispense during the time that you have. And when you're in the fast lane, the third lane, and you're moving forward, you don't get to stop. You just keep ploughing on through at breakneck speed. And when you're having to stop, and you're actually sometimes on that motorway, you might actually be parked on the hard shoulder trying to get through to a service station just to stop and recuperate before you can get back into the lane one, because the third lane is far, far beyond, the idea of where you can be. And for me, it was like, I've got to do my slow steps. I've got to take each day as it comes and be realistic about what I can do. And also learning to let go letting go is really, especially when you're trying to build and you're building and you're giving, Seva is important, my charitable efforts are so important to me, and I didn't want to lose any of those commitments. But, I had to have some difficult conversations, difficult for me, because, I was having to have conversations around needing to either step back from commitments or completely, close those projects.
Do you want to share some of like the commitments that you had? Like, because you do a lot, and I don't think people realize how much you do. Would you like to share some of the projects that you're involved with, that you're doing, and also maybe the ones that you maybe had to close off a little bit?
Yes. So, I'm very grateful for all the opportunities, and when organisations or charities come forward with, we could do with your sort of skills and contribution, I always like to be able to give. So, for example, I'm an ambassador for 2 or 3 national organisations. So as a national ambassador, there is, especially in the VOG space, of violence and women and girls space, I'm a national ambassador for Sikh Women's Aid, and also, tried to support themes and issues that have also affected me. So Khalsa Fostering is another organisation. I'm on the advisory board for City Sikhs, which is a professional network in London. I was also developing a project with a royal in Madagascar. She's a regional queen. I was trying to do some work there. But again, that's sort of, you do need a job, and then you're sort of having to think about, with the little snippets of time that you've got, what you can do that's impactful. And I always have wanted to be involved in initiatives where I feel there's something tangible, there is a real hard outcome coming out of it, because that's where I feel like my time and energy is worth the effort that I'm putting in as well. I'm also a governor for Adam Academy. Yeah.
My son's hopefully going there next year.
Oh, wonderful. It's incredible, the Academy and their work, and like their commitment towards excellence as well. They're an incredible organisation. So those are kind of a couple of the examples. And then I'm sort of mentoring young people as well. So I get a lot of phone calls for, young people that do want advice. And we're involved with a project where we were talking about male allyship, and again, in the violence and women and girls space. So we were sort of working, and I was supporting... So in my life, I've supported and developed postgraduates and undergraduate students as well. So this particular young person was just finishing off his master's here. And so there's a bit of that kind of pep talk relationship that I have. So I do like to give of my time, whether it's on the phone, just to help, if somebody calls and feels that they need some advice or support, then I always do try my very best to make time.
Wow, that's amazing. And like, so obviously you're very busy in doing, like, helping other people from day to day, or if, like you said, you're giving advice to a postgraduate, or you're giving advice to a royal in a different country, or being an ambassador for the various networks that Sikh Women's Aid, was it you said as well, one of them? That's fantastic. How do you find time for yourself, or do you have something that you do where you are able to kind of draw back a little bit to just kind of like, let me just take a minute?
Yeah, that's a great question, and an important question. And for me, the carving out of time for me is that I am very spiritual. I have my faith and spirituality dictates an awful lot of my own mindfulness. So I know that, we try and carve out time maybe to do sort of different, maybe it's the gym or a walk. I'm from the Midlands, so Derby particularly. And one of the things that I miss hugely is, and that was part of my own mindfulness and my own sort of sanctuary time was I absolutely loved the countryside, and Derbyshire, as you will probably know.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It really is. We have the most incredible, diverse landscapes. You know,
Is it Matlock? Was it Matlock?
Yes.
I think there's like some sort of hills you walk in and stuff.
Oh my goodness!
That's fantastic,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. You know, there's a rock climbing, there's paragliding, there's all those kind of like sports and things you can. I mean, it is actually on the doorstep of the Peak District National Park.
Yes.
And so when I passed my driving test, I remember brought this £600 Renault, sort of scrimped and scraped to get my first car. And the first thing that I did, I passed first time. And my driving instructor said to me, he goes, you know, Bim, if you can pass with this examiner, you are something, because he fails everybody.
Really?
And he was wicked, I have to say. Do you remember Windsor Davis? I don't know if you remember him, but this is a Gen X thing, so our Gen Xers will understand. But there was a series called Dad's Army. And one of the chief sort of protagonists in there was Windsor Davis. And this driving instructor was a spitting image of Windsor Davis from the army. But he had his tweed on and he had his jodhpurs, but he looked like a military guy. I did find out that he was an ex-army person. So you can imagine like how regimented he was. You know, when I remember getting in the car for my exam, and he made me pull some manoeuvres, and I remember he made me do a reverse onto a hill that was like 45 degrees and do clutch control and do a reverse in.
Yeah, that's difficult.
I passed with flying colours, and my driving instructor was shocked because no one of his cohort have ever passed with this man. But you know, I was so grateful, you know, to have had the opportunity with this car and the mobility and the freedom that it brought me, because I had already as a young person seen how amazing the Shires was, and with my own car I could go out and see more of it and stay in that greenery. So, you know, any weekends I would be out. I became a National Trust member, and I absolutely thrived being in those green spaces. I am an urban chick and I do like that as well. But for me, the solitude and the idea of walking, and, you know, we had Foremark Reservoir in Melbourne, and I would go and I would do my blue sky thinking in those spaces, and that would give me the time to de-stress and to regulate and get myself ready for the week ahead. So I used to do an awful lot of that practice. And so obviously we're in kind of like the concrete jungle here. So I do try to emulate a bit of that by going out into the green spaces and taking my walks. I walk everywhere. So those sorts of things really help with mindfulness. And on top of that, you know, I have a great network of women, spiritual, high vibing, really interesting characters. And I enjoy having those touch points with them, and just, you know, it's a chance to just, I think we all do it, where it's just a chance to de-stress, de-align, you know, sort of realign, and also kind of like, you know, that sort of mutual support. And we sort of do those check-ins quite regularly, just in terms of, you know, I think we're empaths, and we take a lot, you know, especially if you're working out in very pressurised environment, we take an awful lot of stress on. So it's great to have a network of women who are healers, who are high, you know, vibing high. And I think that sort of uplifts your morale. So I try and engage with my my sisterhood as much as possible. That's really important to me, to be able to have those conversations.
Amazing. And talking about sisterhood, it's obviously International Women's Day tomorrow. And you have won the She Awards, which was in 2023, I believe.
Yes.
And you've been nominated for the UN CSW 70 award? Was it award? Sorry for that.
It's a call to action. CSW. So it's a commission for women. So it's the UN have created this organisation called Commission for the Status of Women, and alongside International Women's Day, which is actually 115 years old. So we're talking 1911 when International Women's Day came about.
Wow, was it?
That's how long that day has been in the calendar, and the kind of the history that was born with that day as well. I think people must not be complacent about the status of women. I mean, I'm really horrified when I hear politicians, and I'm not going to name any names, but I think we all know who they are, who are threatening to remove things like the Equality and Human Rights Commission and the Equality Act. And these are the very same women, I hasten to add, who have benefited from the privileges of having a vote. We go back to 1911, and we go back to the status of women in this country who didn't have a vote, who, by law as well, there was this law where the husband could officially, legally beat his wife or discipline her with a rule. So it's called the rule of thumb, and it's like, you could actually beat her with an implement no bigger than
Is
your
that
thumb.
where the kind of saying comes from?
It does.
Wow.
It comes from there. And, we're 115 years on, and it's really important. Tomorrow is the start of the UN series. It runs for 2 weeks, and it's going to be 2 weeks full of activists, politicians, leaders, women from all backgrounds coming together in New York and Geneva. And we have a cohort here in the UK, and I'm very grateful and honoured. It is an application process that you go through, but they do select you. And this is my second year that I was selected to be part of CSW. So last year it was 69, this year it's 70 years. And the whole idea is that we contribute, as women. So the theme this year is Give to Gain, and last year was Accelerate to Action. So what can we give as women? And I think for me, so I'm in my workspace, I'm going to be holding an equity hour online special where we're going to have our leaders who are going to be talking about what the theme means to them as leaders, and what does because there's a pledging movement within this year. So the whole idea is getting people to commit to pledges for the year and being mindful of that. It's not for a day, it's not for a fortnight, it is for the whole year. So, what can we do continuously in the way that we are practicing our daily routines and our lives and being mindful of that, whether it's personally or professionally? What can we do to support others? And it's also about male allyship. And I saw this really fantastic post on LinkedIn of a male leader, who had written down all of the ways in which women have given and how the world has gained as a result of women's giving. And I thought that was a really beautiful taking stock moment. And I don't, for once, take any of this for granted, because when you've got political rhetoric that we're hearing where, they've sort of mocked it almost, you've got some of these political people who are mocking some of the most fundamental human rights, and the level of diluting it as though it means nothing. And, they're the very same people that have benefited from that. And I think the sheer hypocrisy of it really riles me. And that's why, this isn't like, tomorrow is a really poignant time for, I think, all of us to recognise that just at the click of a finger, you have a political change that actually threatens that, then we're going to be, I mean, I already feel like we're going back, decades with the things that we are experiencing and seeing all around us. And so I think it's really important that we're mindful, we're aware, we challenge it, we speak out, because silence sometimes is, they say being neutral or sitting on the fence in itself is a response.
Yeah, silence is a response in
Yes.
itself, isn't it? So no, I think it's fantastic. You do amazing. You're such a great motivation, inspiration to people, and I want to do this to share how much of an inspiration you are to others as well who may have not heard of you, to the wider communities out there. So, are you doing anything particular to celebrate tomorrow, International Women's Day? Like specifically, is that what you're going to be doing?
The UN caucus starts, but what I wanted to do was just to talk about how can we, in an organisation, how can we give to gain in terms of leadership? And some of, for example, one of the initiatives is around learning and development, coaching and mentoring. Do we consider ourselves in that position where we give of our time in order for someone to gain? Because I'm really into the legacy work, and I'm really, I never had that growing up. I didn't have any role models who took me under their wing and nurtured me. I forged my own path. I've been a bit of a lone wolf in my own journey. But I think it's really important that we send out messages of those that are coming behind us, that, we can give to gain through, for example, giving of our time and looking at systems and processes around maybe learning and development, coaching and mentoring as ways, and maybe as leaders, thinking of, if we don't have those structures, maybe developing those structures. But also for UN Women, CSW 70, there will be a whole series of events taking place online. There are lots of women who are already going to be over in New York for the gathering as well. And a lot of those, there'll be political leaders who are really going to be putting some, we have like this calls to action. So there'll be lots of pledges, lots of calls to action, and lots of recommendations, because we want to shift the narrative. And politically, what's been happening, not just here, but over the pond, you see some of the kind of the rights being eroded and the kind of the demeaning of women. And, I have to say, we've got, the Epstein's file and the meme movement and other examples of, global, like, human trafficking of women, the use of technology, deep fakes, revenge porn. These are huge issues that women are having to navigate. So, there are obviously some legislations coming in here as well to strengthen and give rights and protection for women who are operating in that digital space as well. And I welcome that. I really do, because there should be no hiding space for anyone who wants to exploit women and girls online. And, cybercrime is, and with the use of AI as well, it's a threat and we have to manage it. And I absolutely applaud those women that are going into coding or into the cybersecurity space. There's a phenomenal woman that I met a couple of years ago called Minnie Biwas, who, again, I'll introduce you to her. You could do with having a chat with her one day as
Fantastic,
well.
yeah, absolutely.
She is an absolute trailblazer and an ambassador for the cyberspace and how women operate within that space. So this year, obviously we always have like different themes and calls to action, but in terms of the UN angle, they're definitely going to be wanting to tackle the issue around digital exploitation.
And talking about that, is it, what can others do? Maybe you sort of the men out there, or even the women. What can they do to help with this and to contribute?
That's a great question. And for me, male allyship is fundamental because, you know, the responsibility doesn't lie with women having to find the answers to, you know, misogyny and male hate crime. I'm not saying that men aren't also victims, but proportionately, you know, when you're saying 3 out of 4 women are experiencing some level of abuse every day. I mean, the numbers are atrocious.
That's a high number.
Yeah,
that's 75% of women out there.
It is. And it's only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we really know is going on. And, you know, we want for men to come forward. And I've held our male politician leaders to account. You know, I've been very open with them to say, well, where are you? Why are you not visible and why are you not speaking out? Why is it that the responsibility sits with us as women constantly? I don't see men marching. Today, we have a huge march in Trafalgar Square. You know, the Million Women Rise march. Where are the men? Where are the men?
Do you feel it's a thing where they maybe don't feel invited or included to that? Or do you think that it's just the fact that men aren't speaking up, just generically speaking?
There is so much power. You know, if we're talking about power and positioning, there's nothing wrong with men mobilising and supporting it and being vocal. And so, you know, it's important when women are marching, and they're marching for several reasons, that what you don't have is men ridiculing that.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and I hear this all the time, especially within our communities as well, that, you know, well, they've grown too big for the boots sort of thing, and, you know, they've got too much.
How does that make you feel when you hear something like that?
It's not a surprise, you know. I'm not shocked by it because we've grown up. As a woman, I've seen growing up as a young person the kind of glass ceilings and gatekeeping that was held by men in authority. Fortunately, I had a father who instilled some incredible mindset of equity that made me think, actually, you know, as the oldest, I could go head to head with a man and give him a run for his money in the boardroom.
And that's really important. I want to ask you about this as well, because you kind of answered it yourself. But how was it for you? Like, you've stepped in some big boardrooms and like you've had to challenge some serious senior people of maybe who are male, some female, but obviously when you're coming into a male dominant sort of boardroom, how does that make you feel, and how are you navigating that? Like, have you had challenges, or have you, like, how has it been?
Well, you know, when you arrive into those spaces, you'll have built up a track record. You don't just suddenly land there, you know? It's like, it's that thing about...
Reputation precedes it.
Well, you've been grafting. I mean, I've been grafting away for years, and, you know, the doors haven't opened up for me. I've had to fight. Even when I've gone into all-male scenarios, I also have to thank... Also, I'm going to take a moment to also thank those incredible men and those visionaries who weren't threatened. I am so fortunate. And I would say, you know, my dad kind of set the precedent with that as well, because he wasn't intimidated by the potential of women. And I think when men feel like that and they feel threatened, there's a level of insecurity there, rather than feeling that actually, you know, we can collaborate together and make something happen.
I think there's actually a beauty of actually for a man to step back a little bit, and actually when you see women flourish and you sort of not allow that, but you sort of have that space to them, they do amazing things. Women are amazing beings, you know, like we come from women. women bring us up, for whether boys or girls. Like, women do amazing work, and actually, if we nurture women a bit more in our lives, I feel that we can get so much more. There could be so much more beauty in the world, and I feel that the sort of almost sort of the suppression of women and the voice, it's quite saddening to see that. Like you said, it does seem like it comes from a place of insecurity from some men or most men, and actually, if we kind of maybe let go of that, we can actually see some beauty flourish, and I think we see amazing things from women. And I think that your prime example, like of your father, you said, is instilled some sort of amazing sort of mindset into yourself of like, no, you're equal to a man. Like, even in our faith, we're encouraged about equality and that we are equal to men and women. And even in some cases, we see actually women as higher because of what they go through, the pains and the tribulations and the things they do, for us as families, and and so on. So, like, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Well, can I thank you? I just need to take a moment to thank you. As a new generation moving forward, you said that with such eloquence, and the gravitas of what you've said is, it's a very beautiful thing that you've said that, and I need to honour that with you, because that's the level of kind of inner strength that it takes for a man to recognise that. In nature, we talk about matriarchy and patriarchal systems. And there was a time when there was a matriarchal society which was more nurturing. Even in our holy book, we have references to, who is she, from her kings are born. So that sort of divine, and I believe in the divine feminine. I believe in, I believe in Mother Earth. I believe in that energy. And so when I see misogyny, and I see that level of hatred towards the female, which, again, it comes back to kind of also socialization. It's that generational kind of propaganda machine that keeps moving forward into every generation. My father, when I was a young kid, brought me up to be putting up shelves. I would have a toolbox with him. He would make me do hard graft with him. He was an intellectual, but unfortunately he was never given the chance. I mean, he loved physics, he loved electrical engineering, he had a scientific mind, and he ended up working in a foundry, which I think absolutely broke him. But that was back in the day, in the 60s and early 70s, there was no opportunities really for our communities to thrive. So we've had to claw our way, and I see that in the fights and the battles and the struggles that I've been through as a first generation here, that it's not all landed on a plate. If kids in this generation, we're talking the alphas and the betas who are talking about, well, this is how it is now. Well, no, actually, you are here now as a result of decades and decades of battles, hard work, fighting, absolutely, and tackling injustice. And they're getting a sort of, if we could sort of say, a lens or a window into that world and what that would have looked like when you would have, for example, like the marches that happened last year, the far right coming, then you see some of those incidents, you get a sense of what that era was like for our parents.
Coming back round,
yeah. It really is, and this is what I'm saying. I feel like we've definitely, for all the good work that's been done and the groundwork that's been done, and people like myself and you and many others who are just continuously forging our way through and contributing to society. We're all, we're here as a result of our contributions as well, because I don't believe it's just about this idea that we're taking. We are actively giving back, and we are forging and co-curating with other communities. We're all at that starting point and learning to co-curate our communities together. Obviously, there are very divisive influences as well within our own, and there are, I've been in that space, sort of in terms of community engagement, and I also understand that cohesion is something that doesn't come overnight. It's about building relationships, but you have to. We're not an island. I mean, whilst we're on an island, we're not islands unto ourselves. And that's what I loved about my father, because when growing up, all around me, I would see images of, for example, some of the religious images. So, we had like Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji, Shri Guru Gobind Singh Ji's images. But at the same time, I'm at school and I'm having a harvest festival, or, doing spring baskets for Easter, getting involved in some of those school activities, singing the national anthem, doing the Lord's Prayer, learning about Ramadan, going off to do celebrations with my Diwali colleagues, or, celebrating Mardi Gras with my Jamaican friends. That richness and diversity, it's so special. It's something that I value so much, I mean, in terms of my own faith and understanding, I have a very broad perspective on spirituality, and I believe we've all, if we sat and learnt, there is a golden thread through all of it. And I think one of the things that Guru Nanak Dev Ji spoke about was a desire to want to travel and to ask questions, and he lived by that, and that idea of that, nurturing our own curiosity and not fearing the unknown. So, we would have the cross at home. We would have the images of Mother Mary, Jesus, or the Hindu deities, because he was very global, my dad, in the way that he thought. And that's why I'm very proud to be working in the interfaith space as well, especially with the incredible work that Jazvi and Paramount City Sikhs have done in engaging the Sikh conversation within the interfaith space as well. That's really important, because I think that, moving forward, we really have all got to make effort in building relationships, rather than the kind of judgments and stereotypes that keep getting passed around, and also calling our own out when we see divisive influence that's actually going to impact our communities negatively. It's about calling it out and not putting it under the rug and ignoring it. We have to hold ourselves accountable. I think accountability is something that is so, so important for us to do. Hands up, we've got a lot of skeletons in the cupboard, and it's not a bad thing to say that. People that I hear sometimes, oh, well, you're putting our communities in a bad light. I absolutely feel that we are trying to elevate our communities, but you cannot continuously look the opposite way when there's an elephant in the room, and if we are, as a community, going to heal generational issues that impact us, then we have to have those very difficult conversations, and we have to create healing spaces in our own communities. And that's why, like the work of Sikh Women's Aid or Karma Nirvana, and the great work that Jasvinder Sanghera has done. She set up Karma Nirvana in Derby back in the day, and I remember being invited onto the board, and the great work that she has done, and the kind of the sacrifices against that male influence, which was trying to snuff the movement and trying to kill it, and now it's recognised that things like honour-based violence, is a legal definition. And I worked with the Mayor's Office for Policing and Crime and the Victims Commissioner, and I know that there's a lot of great work that's being done, because this is a space of injustice, and it's been perpetrated, the majority of it's been perpetrated by men against women. And we have to, for our sons and our daughters, moving forward, we have to break those cycles.
I completely agree. There's so much generational trauma there, and I think you're right. And people do want to kind of, for some reason, like keep it under the carpet and There's always this kind of like, what will people say? What will people think? And actually, we're past that now. We're like in 2026 now. We're like, well, hold on a minute. We need to actually talk about these issues so they don't repeat themselves. These patterns don't repeat. And actually, that's the only way we can empower ourselves to get better and to flourish further as a community, as individuals, as maybe humanity. So
I mean,
yeah.
I know there are many Gen Xers like me who will have suffered in silence. They will have seen and experienced, and as survivors, that sort of self-harm and self-infliction through, the level of deaths through alcoholism. My father is a statistic of that, and I've seen, his mental health deteriorate and the self-harm and the way he was meting it out on all of us, and the kind of the difficult childhood space that I occupied, and the impact that just has in terms of for yourself. I mean, I've lost many along the way who haven't been able to find the strength to reach out for help. Now, that's one person too many, frankly. So on the basis of, you look at the risks of people committing suicide or drinking themselves to death or self-harming through drugs and alcohol. And you, on the other hand, go, well, actually, no, we don't have a problem. On balance, I would say it's really important. The time is now. I think it's enough of the evasion and enough of the kind of diluting of it. I think, if we are to save lives, we need to have those very courageous conversations about what's really happening in our communities and what can we do to save lives. Because, growing up, like I said, there was very few of us who had any support. And that idea of identity, and being on your own and suffering in silence, that still to this day exists. And we've got obviously a few more organisations in the space who are trying to help, but it's still happening. And on top of that, you've got the external experiences of young kids having to deal with racism and the opportunities in this country as well around what will our future look like. There's so much there to navigate, the pressures that are there. I'm a Gen Xer who will have known a world without the internet, and we're that only generation that knew the world with it when it wasn't the way it was. And I love technology, and if it enhances life, but I also feel that the net has obviously made the world come to us through this little device, and we have that. And you think about some of the influences that we're getting sort of downloaded into our phones and the kind of messaging that's out there. It's like, as parents, having to be really careful about managing and monitoring, what your children are doing. Influencers and movements out there who would love to brainwash and harm children who are the next generation. And I think we have a responsibility to take care of ourselves and to take care of those that are coming up the change, so we need to be proactive, and we can't sit on our laurels and just think everything's fine.
Okay, so Bimmy, you've been like nominated from some amazing awards and even won them, like such as like the She Awards, the Icon Awards. You've been asked, you've been nominated by, you've just advised us, and many others. How did it first start of you getting awards? Were you putting yourself out there on purpose, or people kind of nominating you? How did that work? Because some people do try and do it strategically, don't they? But some people just do amazing work and they get called up. How does that work?
Well, I was one of those people. But to be honest, awards was never on my radar. I, in fact, was that person that would always be nominating everyone else. I was a great champion of people, and I loved that. And I am one of those that likes to kind of just hide behind the scenes. I'm not really sort of a pushy person in that respect. So just going back to my first award that I won was when I was working for the Northcliffe Group. So I started out in social action broadcasting and in radio back in the day. So I went on a media training scheme because, again, I was very passionate about community issues, felt that there wasn't enough being done or said, or there wasn't that representation. So again, right timing, right space. I got selected to go on this media training program, and they asked us at that point, what do you want to specialise in? And I love radio and I love TV. I was doing lots of work experience, but I homed into social action broadcasting. So I ended up getting trained by the Beeb in particularly social action. And within a year of volunteering at the Action Desk at BBC Radio Derby, so I was learning to produce, and my heartfelt thanks to my incredible manager, Johanna Bucklow. She was a great mentor, and she was a tough taskmaster, but she got me through, and her teaching and the quality of her support meant that I actually ended up running a social action broadcasting unit the very next year, and I ended up heading that in independent radio. So, I spent a lot of time in media and sort of producing, presenting and being on air. And so I was really kind of keen on kind of staying in that space because I felt like I had the skills to be able to kind of bring in lots of different diverse voices. And that then evolved into when the internet came online. So we're talking 1998. And I was really keen on electronic publishing at the time because the internet had started and our local paper had just come online. I had come back from a national role and I was looking for opportunities. So I approached the editor of the newspaper and I said, look, I've seen your website and I would like to come and do an internship. Can you offer me any work experience? So, I was out there with my sort of bravado, and before you know it, I ended up doing a 3-month internship and got a knock on the door one day in the office saying, the editor would like to see you. And this was with the head of electronic publishing. Both of them sat me in their office and said, look, Bim, we've got this national pilot that we want to launch. We're going to launch it here in the Midlands, in Derby, in this county. And we want you to be the face of it. And so they explained what the project was. And I just thought it was an absolute dream come true because it was doing what I was doing before in radio, but it was using the net, the electronic publishing field to be able to get diverse voices to come together. And the project was called the Beehive Community Network, hence being called Queen Bee, because I ended up becoming, the bee of the hive, as it were. And I launched that pilot for Northcliffe. It was the first one of its kind in the UK. And it went on. So we launched it for Derby and Derbyshire, and then it rolled out. And the model and the development work that I did with the teams and the developers, that became a good practice model. So a year later, 1999, I remember when we got that project off the ground. I mean, it was such a success. We were offering community organisations a digital space, a viable networking space online. And it was kind of that virtual network. And it was unheard of at the time. And it was so innovative. And I felt so utterly proud to be leading on that. And so my first, so they put us forward. We had what was called, back in the day, it was called New Media Awards. And it was a Northcliffe-wide programme of awards. And I ended up winning the Best Online Community Service Award for Northcliffe Publishing. And that was fantastic. 2000. So that was my first experience of winning that. And I remember being in the car with all the colleagues, when we told we were nominated. And on the way back, they were just so thrilled. And they said, Bim, this is the beginning of many more. And I just, you know, at the time you don't do it for that reason. You don't do the work for that, but it was wonderful to be recognised for the excellence of what that project was about. And I thought it's great because I was that only brown face in that organisation. There was no one else like me out there. So I felt very proud on a number of levels. And then, you know, after that, I would find myself being in situations where I'd get an email going, "Oh, you've been nominated." I haven't targeted myself in terms of, "Oh, I want that award," but I have also been encouraged to apply. And there's lots of kind of, you know, I think now there's some incredible awards out there, and the recognitions for women as well, and the She Awards, which again was incredible to win Inspirational Role Model 23. I was so moved by it because I was not expecting that. And it was a shock. I have to say, I hadn't prepared anything. I was all jittery when I sort of stood up because I saw my name on the screen and you know, and I'd got this amazing collective of women that were there to support me and the She Tribe. But I absolutely did not envisage winning it. So, you know, it was incredible. That was an amazing moment to win that.
I think that's why it becomes so much more like deserved, because you like almost like humble in the sense you're like, I don't expect to win this. I don't even expect to be nominated, and you've gone and just, you know, smashed it out of the park and won it. It's fantastic. It's a credit to you. I think you do amazing work, and you've been nominated for so many other awards as well. Like we've just seen, like for the Icon Awards and the MBE that came about in 2023. How did that? You had to talk us through how that came about.
Well, firstly, I just want to acknowledge that, you know, we don't acknowledge the Almighty in our space, and I always try and do that because I do genuinely believe that it is with Waheguru's Kirpa and that sort of mercy and grace that we get, you know, recognised and acknowledged. So I want to say that first and foremost, that everything comes through the Almighty and that we are vessels for that. And I feel like if I can use these in a way that helps to uplift and to share and to inspire, then with God's grace, you know, that makes me feel as though it is worth it. I have, so many a time I have been approached with the honours. So in my sort of awareness at the time, I understood when I was asked to nominate others for those honours that it's a very strict process. And you can apply, but there is no guarantee that if you nominate someone, that they get it. So it is a nominations process.
So you nominate someone else?
So I have been approached by people to say, "Oh, I want an OBE. I want, you know, would you write a letter for me?"
Right.
So I've done that. So I have done that for
other
others.
people.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't realise that's the process.
Yes. So it is very much.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not self-nomination. It comes through someone So I have throughout my life had people approach me. And if I feel that, because also you're putting your name on it, so it's like you have to obviously, you know, because it is a very strict and transparent process where they will dig into your background. You know, you have to be absolutely honest about when you put other people forward for the nominations, that you are absolutely on point with what you're saying, because the panel will do those deep dives. When I was approached, I have to say I was a bit nervous about the idea, because I also understood the gravitas of that honour and what that meant. I was put forward by a collective of people. You know, there are a few who said, you know, we really do want to encourage you. So I said, okay, well, there's no guarantees, and I had no expectation. These things also take time as well. So it took, a couple of years. It doesn't happen overnight. But then I remember just getting this letter through the post, and it had the crest of the royal family on it, and straight away it was a legal letter. So I thought, oh my goodness, what's all this,
What have I done?
I'm being,
What have I done now?
yeah, it was like the crest have been summoned somewhere. And when I opened the letter and it said that I have been awarded this, so I have asthma, and
Right.
I nearly had, and I had to literally open
the
up the
inhaler.
door to get the inhaler to get out, and because I was just like, I was so shocked when I read the letter. It was absolutely like a ethereal moment. I was like, this can't be happening. Is this real? It felt like that. It felt though so sort of like, oh my goodness me, is this for real? Really? So it took me a while. I think I had to then go make myself a cup of tea, calm down, and then read the letter again and understand what it said. And then they give you the option of deciding whether you want to accept it. And I did, so, because, you don't have to. And you hear a lot of people who say that, they were and they've declined it. I felt for me that my father and mother would be really proud. And the motivation for me receiving, because in my family, my generational line on my dad's side, they're all military people.
Wow. Okay.
So, and they have been awarded medals. So this is not a phenomena that I'm not familiar with. But I felt like for my mum and dad that if I could do anything to honour their legacy of their effort, that's the reason why I accepted it, because it was, it was a homage to them, not so much for me, but for them, because their sacrifices enabled me to be here. And I received that award by Her Late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II in her Platinum Jubilee year. And I remember this was an amazing moment for me, because as a young kid growing up, I was always into royal lineages, and I was into Princess Diana when she came on the scene, but I also enjoyed the kind of the experience of the Queen. And I know the Queen came to Derby in 1977 for the Queen's Jubilee, and I am a royalist in that respect. I loved all of the kind of the paraphernalia and pomp and show of what it means to have a royal family. And I remember my father, and again it comes back to my father, back in the day TV used to switch off at midnight, and then the national anthem, the Queen's God's, it would come on
At midnight.
at midnight, and it would close after the anthem, and it would switch off. So my dad would sometimes haul me out of bed, and I would have to stand up in front of the TV and salute
really?
and sing God Save the Queen. So that was amazing, like to receive it. But then obviously, with Her Majesty passing on, I had my investiture at Windsor Castle, and it was given to me by King Charles III, which was an incredible experience. And it was to honour my my service to the charitable and voluntary sector that I'd been in for sort of decades. I'd started my seva back when I was a teen, when I was a very broken teen, I think it was really important. That was the third sector was my lifeline, and it saved me and it helped me. But I also felt it was important to give back to British society through my seva and to be involved. I thought, after I lost my parents when I was 13, the give back for me was really important, because I did get help, and I'm very grateful to our community, our leaders, our councillors, Councillor Nirmal Dinsa, the Rai families, and Dame Margaret Beckett, who was our MP for Derbyshire South. She did an incredible job, because one of the things that I did request, losing, I was 13 at the time, so it's like I was making very adult decisions they died within 11 months of each other, so...
And I'm sorry to hear that, because that I remember when you told me as well, and then that's heartbreaking. You're so young, 13 years old, you're having to then look after the rest of your siblings as well. And was it your grandfather?
Well, grandfather came as a lifeline throughout this process, because at that time we had no relatives here, we didn't have any kind of extended real sort of family blood relations, as it were, so very much felt like we were on our own. And there were 4 of us, so there's myself and 3 siblings who are 5-6 years younger than me, and I was just like, I have to. And I think I remember that sort of thing about being dutiful to the family. The duty is really important, and I come from a lineage of people who have sacrificed and done their duties for family and negated themselves, and my father and mother are pure examples of that. So for me, duty and honour is not a concept that I was... how some people can feel almost like hesitant or resentful. I didn't feel resentful for taking that on. For me, it was like, I actually do believe this is my purpose. And my purpose is to safeguard my siblings and, the family as much as I can. I don't want them to be split up. We would have been made wards of the state because of the fact that we were all minors. So, I don't know, the divine worked through me, and the question was asked by the councillor, Councillor Nermal Dint, said, like, what do you want to do? And I remember sitting, I had literally come back on that day from school, and I'm having to make a really adult decision about, my mum's passed away. I'm at risk of losing everything here. I have to salvage this. So I made a request. I said, can you do everything you can to keep us together? I will look after my siblings, but I know that obviously I'm young. So my mum was the only child. So I thought, we've got grandfather. I didn't know him, as in, like, we didn't have a relationship because he was abroad. And I said, if you can ask Grandad to come here for Mum's funeral, and then maybe grandfather could stay here. He was like in his 70s. Oh, wow. But, because also there's a cost implication with putting kids into care. Yeah. And whilst I had experienced that growing up as a child, I also understand the damage that could cause in terms of our well-being. We'd have all been split up. And back in the day that we didn't have Asian foster parents. And I remember obviously growing up with white parents, and they did an incredible job of supporting me, but those were definitive years, and I wanted to keep us all together as much as possible. So with the help of Dame Margaret Beckett and our councillors and the community, they were able to get Grandad to become the legal guardian.
So he stayed here then?
He stayed here until he passed away sort of 6 years later. But he, and I'm very grateful for the fact that, he did that. But again, he was an elderly gentleman, so he needed all that Siva stuff as well. And as a sort of he had his own issues as well. So growing up, I felt like my burdens were huge. I felt, I had no choice but to do that, really, because the option of the other side wasn't really an option. And I'm glad, I look back now and, the family they all now have got their own families, and there was that sense of stability that came in, because it's traumatic, growing up and losing your parents and then getting into a state system. It's traumatic. And so anything that can kind of soften the blow of that around grieving and bereavement, it means that our communities have to try and rally around. And I'm just very grateful for the help from social services and other kind of like the educational system when it came in to help me as much as I could. But my priorities changed as a result of that one day, you know, when my mother then passed away. It changed everything. So, you know, you have to make sacrifices in life. And I don't look back on that. That was my purpose. And as a result of that, that's when my seva to the community started. I wanted to also give back for the help that we were given.
I think that's an extraordinary story. And hopefully we can dig a bit more deeper into that next time. I think what you've been through, I mean, firstly, sorry to hear about your parents having passed away when you were so young, and you having to go through the sort of the foster system and to look after your siblings, and also your sort of your nannaji by the sounds of it. And it can see why you've kind of then decided to give back, because it is a lot of help. It is a very difficult time to navigate, and you're such a young age, 13 years old, you know, in a country that's kind of, you know, not much of our community around, and, you know, so much going on. I think you've done fantastically well to then give back consistently and continuously throughout your life, to then give, you know, to do all these amazing things. Like, you're currently the senior HR specialist of Capital City College for the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion department.
That's right.
That's amazing.
Right. Yes.
And you're doing that. You're like the ambassador for like 3 networks at the moment. So you got the Sikh Women's Aid, you've got the City Sikhs, and what was the third one? Sorry.
So Casa Fostering,
which is fantastic. And you've won a variety of awards. You've got the MBE, you've got the She Awards, you've got so many awards and accolades. And I think you're a great inspiration. For anyone that does want to follow Bimmy Rai MBE on LinkedIn or any of the socials, we'll put them in the description below. So please do check them out. Bimmy, I'm so sorry, we don't have too much time left. I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions, if you could give us some quick answers. The main thing I think I really want to ask is, from what you've been through and from what you see with the sort of the social inclusion, the diversity, everything going on in the world right now, what is the one piece of advice you would give to the youth of today, particularly maybe in sort of BAME communities? What's the one piece of advice you would give them today to navigate life?
That's an incredible question. And if I was to be succinct, I would say, don't take anything for granted. What we're given today may not be here tomorrow. It's really important that they build strong networks and supportive networks. So go and be proactive in sourcing your tribe, because you're going to need them in time. So this idea that, you know, we can go out there and do it on our own, I don't believe that we can. I think we need our supporters and our helpers along the way, even if they're for a few seasons. That's happened throughout my life, where I have ventured and I've wet my feet and I've gone forward, but I've also had helpers. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Be clear about what it is that you need. Don't give up hope, because it can feel a bit hopeless out there. And if you're passionate, continue to believe in yourself. You might not get it straight away. Don't give up. Try and source your tribe, your people. They will be there to help you navigate those times when you do need that support on your journey. And I think, you know, us all helping each other is really important. So, you know, don't be afraid to ask for help.
I think that's phenomenal advice, everyone. That's so it's find your tribe, ask for help if you need, never give up, and you're sometimes going to get what you want or what you need later time. So maybe be patient as well.
Absolutely.
I think that's great advice, Bimmy Rai. Bimmy, thank you so much for joining us today. I've got so many more questions I want to ask you, and I think we could spend a whole day in the studio doing that. And I think we will get you in. I would love to have you in the next sort of maybe in summertime, in the next 6 months, to see how your projects are going, see if you won any more awards, which I'm sure you're going to win tons more, and you rightly deserve. And thank you so much. I look forward to collaborating with you as well in the future, because we spoke about some ideas that we want to do to help the youth of today, along with some of the other guests that we've had on this show. So Bimmy, thank you so much again. Everyone, I want you to just take a minute to just like, follow, subscribe, not only this podcast, but also Bimmy Rai MBE on her channels, because she's been very articulate, very eloquent in the discussion that we've had today. And so sorry that we didn't get to ask all the questions that we wanted to ask Bimmy, but we definitely would love to get her on in the future. So would you join us in the future, Bimmy?
It'll be my absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
I
am so grateful to you for this.
You are very, very welcome. Everyone, the beautiful and the bright Bimmy Rai. Thank you so much. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an absolute pleasure having Bimmy in the studio and going through her journey of success and leadership and the challenges she's also faced, as well as some of the awards she's won. Please like and subscribe and turn on all bell notifications so that you can know when we're next online. Take care. Bye for now. Today's guest has spent over 30 years shaping communities, challenging inequality, and building leaders from the ground up. She's been awarded an MBE for her service to the charity sector, but behind the title is a woman who's had to navigate identity, leadership, resistance, and responsibility. Because leadership isn't about position, it's about impact. Before the MBE, before the boardrooms, before the influence, there was a young girl trying to understand her place in the world. Bimmy shares that story today, and I invite you to listen to it. Subscribe and follow for more. Take care.